Welcome to Surrender School.
And together, let's say the set-aside prayer. God, help me to set aside everything I think I know to leave space for what I have yet to learn. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and just talk about this. All right, so let me introduce Michael Naylor. He is the director of the Maine Enneagram Center for Transformation and Wellbeing. He is a professional change coach and an Enneagram Institute faculty member. He's a licensed addiction therapist and clinical supervisor. He is a pro member of the International Enneagram Association, and he's also a teacher there. He is the author of the book, The Alchemy of the Enneagram and Transforming Addiction. We have a monthly book study on Mondays on Surrender School with Michael. And this is at the bottom of his email. Compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It is a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. All right, and with that, Michael, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. We'll be talking today about zone 2 and 3 and the first instinct of self-preservation. And before I start, I just want to add that sometimes getting clearer on your instinctual preferences can take a while. They could be so deeply habitual that we don't even notice that that's how we're hardwired. People around us might, if they know anything about the instincts. I know when I was learning about the instincts, with Russ Hudson, and he'd gone through a thorough description of all the types and each of the instincts, and I didn't know what my dominant was, and my wife and friend said, "Are you out of your mind? You're an intensity type. That's just how you're wired." And it's almost like the water I was breathing, I couldn't, or drinking, I couldn't sense it until I started to get eyes to see how I responded to attraction, to intensity, to being, close to people who have a lot of intensity. So not to be discouraged, errors will be made. One of the things that's often said is that people, when they try to get clearer on their instinctual stack, first go around about 35% of the time they're accurate, and then it's just a work in progress. So what I invite you to do, really to get an intimate connection with the instincts, is to look at each zone, like for 1 week, work with zone 1. We talked about zone 1, well-being, health, taking care of nutrition, being mindful about, exercise, all those sorts of things. But just for 1 week, just notice how you show up for that. Because sometimes we also have this thing of imagining that we really occupy zone 1 and we take care of ourselves, and then we get on the scales, or we just go for a walk and we're out of breath, and then we start getting real about, do I actually participate in this zone, or is it a fantasy I have of myself? So everyone is susceptible to that one. I mean, that's what stops or makes it difficult in getting accuracy on your type, is that many people, when they first start, have a fantasy about who they are or who they wish to be, and they take the test and they show up as a fantasy. But people around them go, that's not you at all. So there can be quite a gap between the fantasy, we might call it our self-image, and what's really going on. And just to be patient with yourself and be willing to, change up your identification as you learn something new and different. So that said, I'm going to jump into zone 2 here. When we look at self-preservation, there's 3 zones. They're separate from each other. One doesn't affect the other. So when we do a look at it, for instance, in my experience, zone 1 is well-being, taking care of health, fitness, diet, rest, etc. Anything that relates to my healthy existence. That's well-being, zone 1. Could be even going to therapy. Now that one is independent of zone 2, which has to do with practicality, taking care of practical issues, taking care of and being mindful around what are my physical needs, what are my financial needs. So nothing intensifies. It's just a different look at one part of the self-pres instinct. So there's three parts, three zones in each instinct. And so we're looking at them not as increasing intensity, but as separate entities. And then the question you have to look at is, after you've looked at all three zones of self-preservation, which is what we are starting into, and we're going into the second zone, is what zones 1, 2, and 3 are strong, and what zones are ones that I actually forget about or just have an aversion towards, which we often call the blind spot, the shadow part of the zone. So just to look at it as independent entities or descriptions. Okay, so I'm going to go briefly over these, but just want to remind you, we have three instincts that tend to be, one is dominant, tends to be one, and the dominant instinct, when we're less healthy or when we're afraid, tends to be compulsively gone to, because the dominant instinct is the one that we have ease with. We're wired for it. It's like we're just hardwired for that particular instinct to come online and to make us feel good. It's usually an instant feel good experience. The second zone we call the secondary, which is a more neutral operating zone. We have access to it. We don't have as many problems with it. You know, for the first one, let's say we're talking about self-pres, the first zone of well-being. You know, if I'm under stress, I don't know how to manage my emotional life. What I might do is become one of these people that works out 5 hours a day. I get compulsive about my exercise, or I'm somebody who becomes really super strict about my diet. Again, it's self-preservation, well-being, being expressed in a less balanced way. So just to know that secondary, whatever the instinct is, rides lighter in our soul, and we have access to it. We can draw on it when we need it. And then the third zone, we often say, is the least developed, and it's one that doesn't tend to come naturally. It can feel alien. We can have an aversion to it, or even kind of a rebellious streak about it, or just because we're not good at it, we have a pretty low self-esteem in that particular instinct. So those are the three. Keep that in mind if you can. And ultimately, we're trying to learn how to balance the instincts, which means that they take on a more equal, we have more equal access to all three. Now that can be and is a lifelong journey, because the blind spot is really tough. It's got a mind of its own, and it doesn't care if you're interested in it. It just does what it does, which usually means it falls asleep and forgets what it was going to do. But anyway, the goal is how do we bring balance? And so one of the conversations we have about the instincts is that if you work on your blind spot, if you make conscious effort to get more present and not forget about it, and you set up, you know, coaching support so that when you start to forget about it, someone there is saying, don't forget, you're going to pay the bills on time this week, this month, right? Is the more we put conscious energy into the blind spot, it tends to take away the compulsive aspect of the dominant instinct. It quiets it. It brings it into balance, which means that the passion of my type becomes more manageable and less active. So there'll probably be questions about that. That's great. Just hang on to them, put them in the parking lot. So the three zones, which is different than the three instincts. The first instinct, we got well-being, resources, and practical know-how, home, domesticity, nesting. So we did well-being last time, and it's been recorded. I invite you to go back and take a look at it. So let's just take a look at resources. So again, this is the self-preservation instinct overall. You know, I'm taking care of my physical and material domains, and of food, water, health, shelter, etc. In resources, we're looking at earthy, practical, hands-on experiences with our reality, which first, we have these builders here. There's a lot of times people who have by the second zone of practicality, when it's operating well, have a natural inclination towards creating things, making things, fixing things. So let's just take a look at these interesting facets. So practical know-how and our attention to resources. When people have this as a strong instinctual pattern, they have a natural capacity or tendency to really pay attention to how much money they have, taking care of their money, running a business, everything that's practical around the nuts and bolts of money and using money. They often are adept at the practicalities of life. And this can be, making sure your yard looks good, everything's been kept up, making sure the outside of the home, if it has repairs, they get repairs. My father-in-law is a type 8 self-pres, and he walks in the door and he can spot immediately everything that needs to be fixed. And he can go room by room and give us a list. Like he just sees, oh, this is, you need to change that light fixture. So if you have a strong zone 2, it's just something that comes natural. You notice these things, and if something needs to be fixed, you go and do it. The third, point here is just this idea that there's something around organizing and structuring and making things predictable in the area of money, food, health, and home. Practicality, scheduling, regularity is something that makes me feel good. Now, if you have this as a blind spot, those things drive you crazy, and you don't understand why people are so uptight and are so practical and organized all the time. But if you have this as a strong zone, you wonder why everybody is such a fool not taking care of business and organizing their resources. So, it can really create some perceptual differences in relationships. So, again, not being put off by dealing with the basics of life. So my wife has a bit stronger self-pres than myself. And she says, I actually really feel good when I clean the house. I go, how does that happen? I don't even understand how that could even be possible, because I've got low self-pres and it's just agony. I can do it, but my soul is just saying, oh, this is the wrong place to be putting your energy. There's a tendency to be aware of and sort of know the rules of life, like, how finances work, how jobs work, and a tendency or a skill in ensuring stability by preparing for unexpected emergencies, right? So self-pres, Don Riso is a dominant self-pres. He always had backup supplies of food. First, his cupboards were filled to the brim, and then down the basement was a whole other supply system of food. So when people have this dominant instinct, having backup plans are just a part of what you do. They just make sense. If you live in Maine and you have dominant self-pres, you don't just have one generator, you have 2 or 3 in case the first one doesn't work, portable generators when the power gets knocked out. So there's preparation awareness for predictable resources and safety emergencies. And this is, if you think about certain institutions like the IRS is a self-preservation instinct organization, keeping finances clear, making sure, you're paying your bills, or you're getting your income returns, etc. But a lot of our institutions are organized like self-pres institutions of organizing, focus, practical application of skills. And then, and this is a curious one, is that when people have a strong second zone, they have what some people call a necessary ambition. Well, what does that mean? Well, a lot of times, like my daughter is a self-pres 9. And when she was a senior in high school, she researched the different master's programs that she liked and chose the one that would make her the most money. Who thinks like that? I just went to school and just took the next psychology course that came along and just kept following that through until I got my, degree. But she, from the very start, was mindful about, I want to be able to take care of myself. I don't want to have to rely on other people. Here's a master's in occupational therapy. That's where I'm going because it also takes advantage of my skills. So they apply their gifts to financial security, thriving, enhancing. It's not haphazard. If somebody has a blind spot self-pres, organizing this kind of thing, or even feeling the need to be really clear about applying one's skills to a career that will bring, allow them to be independent, it is not something that comes easily. So I use my resources practically and skillfully. And the key theme around this also is this idea of conserving. I conserve my resources. I don't waste them. I'm mindful if I've overused. And certainly if under stress, I might go in the opposite direction. But ultimately, there's something around having a kind of humility and gratitude for whatever gifts I've been given in this area and using them well. It's like a sense of feeling like I've been entrusted to use my self-pres capacities in a way that really serves myself and my family and friends. So there's a great self-pres book on how to organize yourself called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. And it's this kind of self-pres step-by-step strategy so that you don't accumulate stuff you don't need, and step-by-step strategy of getting rid of things you never use. Self-pres all the way. You'll be a neat and clean person at the end of it. You might be miserable, but in my school, but and so then what about this? So when my father-in-law comes to do a job for us, I notice this all the time. If we're building a shed in the backyard, he prepares ahead of time what tools he needs and lays them out. He has a sense of how long this journey will take. It's going to take me 10 hours, so we'll do 4 today, 6 tomorrow. He's got his backup tools. And so he's prepared for things to break down. And if they do, he's got the tool that he needs. That's all self-preservation. And he's also aware of what's my energy today. A lot of self-pres people are really good at noticing, hey, I just ran out of gas. Time to take a nap. I'm going to go do that. The blind spot self-pres people just drive forward and, maybe get away with it until they start getting sick. So the other thing is this idea of liking to know what's coming next, and in a sense, really having a wish to be in charge of my own projects, because a lot of times self-pres people are so competent at what they do in the self-pres range, they don't want outside help because you mess up their plans and you make it harder for them to complete what they want to complete. So self-reliant, don't want your chaos or inconsistency coming into my domain. The other thing I notice about them is just this capacity to notice something is not functioning well and to have the sense of, I see it, so something should be done about it as soon as possible. Why would I wait 6 months, right? Well, if you're low self-pres like myself, because 6 months is even kind of rushing it. Let's go 7 months. So the sense of time urgency around fixing things is wildly different between somebody who has a strong zone and somebody who's asleep in it. So they don't procrastinate on self-pres tasks, which I have been guilty of. My wife reminds me. I know where my tools are. And so the other thing I noticed about self-pres is, you know how sometimes you get a table that needs to be put together, right? Self-pres folks actually use the directions, and they go in and they follow it and they get it done and it works. Low self-pres go looking for a high self-pres to put the table together because they know if they can't put it together by their own intuitive grace, it's not going to happen. So again, just a difference in style. Strong self-pres usually know where the self-pres resources are, the plumbers, electricians, carpenters, painters, roofers. I can ask my father-in-law about, who's who's a carpenter you recommend, and he can give me a list of 3. There's a sense if I have in my menu of emergency items knowledge about who to call when I need self-pres repairs. So some questions on the Zen of practicality. Do you know how much money is in your account? Do you have a system for paying your bills? Or is it haphazard and creative like my own? Have you checked your car's oil levels? Do you know when you need a tune-up or an oil change? Are you mindful around the structure of how you take care of a car? Are the repairs in your home outside and inside that you're forgetting about or avoiding? That's always a good checklist. Do you have backup plans for loss of electricity, power, plumbing, heating problems? Do you organize your life? Do you have an organizational bent to your life? So I want to just, the basic question is, what is your relationship with this issue of practicality? Are you lazy, overzealous, scattered, forgetful, strict? Strong self-pres sometimes can get really strict. If they're under stress, they get really strict about making sure everything's organized. Am I indifferent, resigned, balanced? What's true? So let's, I just want to open up for a couple minutes of questions before we do the 3rd zone and just see if anything is bubbling up for anyone.
Kathy M., I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted, dear.
Actually, that was an accident, but it's all
Oh.
good. But thank you.
Okay.
I practically know
so
how to where to
excited.
hit my ring. Sorry, give me a minute.
Okay. Any questions or sharing or anything on this zone, on zone 2? Go ahead, Terry.
Hi, I'm Terry. I don't know if it's on written, but I have, I'm sorry, I don't have my camera on. I'm not ready for that yet. But I'm a 6, and I'm noticing that I'm low in this area. It's hard. It's very hard. And so I'm curious, and, because I feel the pull, but, it's just something that just doesn't come easy. So I'm curious, what do you do with that?
Well, you stay tuned. We're gonna cover that in the 4th presentation on what to do with the situation you're in. What I often encourage people to do as a start point, let's say with self-pres, is to put up the list of those self-pres tasks that you have an aversion or don't like to do. And for 1 week to choose the one that's easiest and to see if you can show up for it. And don't beat yourself if you don't. You're trying to reverse a kind of habit that got built into you when you were a little girl. But it helps to have allies who can say, okay, Terry, just calling to check in. Did you get to the dishes today? If not, why not go do them right now, so that you start to develop an action that follows your awareness of what needs to get done, and also just to expect that when you're doing it, it's not going to cheer you up. It can feel like you're carrying, bags of bricks to the kitchen sink, and now you're going to clean stuff, and just notice all the different, you could call them defense patterns that pop up. Usually, I notice as a self-pres shadow in my life that there's like a little kid in me that rebels against ordinary tasks. It's just kicking and screaming all the way, to the laundromat or whatever else I'm doing. So just an idea, choose one that's the easiest. And if you develop a habit with that over the next 6 months, praise, Almighty God, and try for the next easiest one.
Yeah, I want to kind of couch this in the idea of that I hit really, really bad emotional, physical, spiritual burnout, major hostile work environment, medical, trauma, I mean, from surgeries. So I'm curious, if you couch that and then the the chronic pain and fatigue with this that makes the self-pres stuff, that the to-do list painful. What do you like? It's even extra couched.
Well, you've got your hands full with that. I wouldn't add anything to that schedule of self-pres tasks that you're working on.
Yeah, except showers.
You just need to have support around you.
Yeah.
And, because that's big stuff. So
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you, Michael. Fiona, to you.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, just saying that my husband is really he's an 8 and he's very strong in self-pres, DIY person. And we've been together for a million years, so he always does all that stuff, like been together like 40 years. And when you said that thing about, sometimes I said to him, can I do the things? Can I go to the bank? So I can learn, and I can see he's a bit like, and that just explains why, because he's very good at it and he wants to do it, So yeah, so I'm just saying, it's in relationships you can see this thing can be a bit difficult. Yeah, that's it basically. Thank you.
So it sounds like your husband has strong self-pres, and you're grateful for that.
Yeah, so I can just dream and play and, yeah, I can just skip and hop. And he does the car and he does everything. He does all the bills and, but I'm a babe in the woods, literally,
Well, so one of the things you might consider is if you took on trying to develop a habit of doing one of those, just one of them, the result of that effort, even though it might be challenging, would start to wake up more presence in you. So there's a gift in working with our shadow. And what is your type?
I'm 4.
Okay, so you're a 4 and you like to daydream and have poetic reverie and
Yeah, and go to workshops and do enneagrams and and do art on Zoom and
right. So with that orientation, I notice that as I've learned to do self-pres tasks, which I do all of our accounting every month. It's like pulling teeth every month, every year, but I do it. And what it's done is it's created a kind of practicality in me that allows me to land my creative gifts more and to follow through with my creative action. So even though it's a painful, when we start working with the shadow or the repressed part of the instincts, even though it's not that.
it's frozen.
I think you froze.
Yeah. Too much self-preservation.
That doesn't cheer me up. I've yet to be cheered up after kind of strength that I missed that last thing you said.
You froze. So the last part of your sentence we missed.
Boy, that was the best sentence I've said.
I know.
I even forgot it. That's the bad news. So just a reminder that if you start taking on one of these tasks that you feel most drawn to or have least resistance and begin to actually participate in it, it begins to translate into a kind of practicality around your other gifts. So, for type 4s, they're great dreamers, but when it comes to landing the dream and doing the art or doing the music or writing the book, they already felt like they did it in their imagination. So why would I actually put it into physical form? But this is where self-pres is really important. Can I bring my dreams into physical, practical form? And this is where working on these gifts can make a difference. So I see we have 2 more questions, and I want to go on to the next zone. So hold that question, put it in the parking lot, and we'll come back to it. I promise.
Okay, so Joy and Kathy, I see your hands are up, so you guys will be the first next time. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, and I apologize for my Kleenex, but I seem to have a right nostril, left nostril that wants to run autonomously from my will. So it goes. All right, so now we're going into domesticity, the home, the 3rd zone. And here we have a beautiful little hobbit house. I think all the hobbits were self-pres types. So domesticity. There's several features we're going to talk about to start off. People with this strong zone, third zone, like the feeling of having built a nest, a cozy home, a place that they can come and just relax in. They really, if their environment at home isn't attuned to them, they're really bothered by it. It's like, there's clutter, or there's disharmony with colors, or if I notice I don't have a comfortable couch, I go get one. So people with a strong zone are good at creating a domicile, a comfortable place, so that when they come home, they can relax, as opposed to somebody who has a less healthy, repressed third zone, where it's more like I know how to build a nice college dormitory environment where, I've got my books stacked over here, and I got my clothes over here, and I don't know where the tools are. But there's a sense of a real nesting sense around and a real appreciation of creating a nest for family and themselves. So my atmosphere is important. And so carry down further and just say part of building the comfort zone, I've noticed, most people who have this zone strong have their cupboards arranged in such a way that they can get to the food, articles, or the equipment I need, or whatever it is I need for cooking or mixing salads, etc. It's organized, and there's a way that it's, in a sense, thriving with possibility, right? So you have that, and then it comes to when we talk about home ambiance, the self-pres folks. I remember being in Don Risso's house, and I've never been in so many comfortable chairs. It's like, like Goldilocks and the Three Bears going around checking each chair. It's like, oh, this is massively comfortable. Oh, and so is this one. Boy, you are prepared to sit and enjoy this sitting. Well, dominant people in this zone, that's something they do. There's often a blending of certain harmony of colors. Depending on your type, it's going to be a different style, but there's a harmonizing of colors that creates an atmosphere that makes them feel good. So they always, I think in my neighborhood, most of the people are self-pres. If I look outside, it's like every year there's a cycle where they go out and start working on their grass, their gardens, or if fall hits and they start, stripping away things that they used in the spring and summer. And I'm just haphazard. It gets done, but I think, well, they must think that we're the ones in the neighborhood who have never lived in a neighborhood. I'm a type 4, so I have all these flags, right, in the front yard. 3 or 4 flags, which I am the only one in the neighborhood who has those flags, and I'm proud to say that's my type 4 signature. So attention to yard, taking care of it, organizing, know where stuff is. The link between clutter and stress is real. So what dominant self-pres will say, especially in this zone, is when there's chaos in any area that they're used to having organization in, they get stressed. It's like it triggers a survival need. And, if you think about these drives, the 3 instincts as biological needs that are built in for survival. Well, for the self-pres dominant, when any of these things are out of harmony, it's like there is an emergency here. I got to get it done, not tomorrow and not next week, right now. So that's where, and if I speak to self-pres who talk about if they have a partner who isn't quite as attuned to their needs, they often feel almost like offended. Like, how could you do that to me? You left your coat on the floor. That's like ungodly. I'm not sure I'll be able to forgive you. So it's like it becomes personal. And again, the thing to remember, if you have strong self-pres and your partner doesn't, it's not personal. It's blindness. And part of the work is noticing first, this isn't being done to me, although I am the recipient of the behavior, but it's not personal. Same way, if you're the dominant 1 instinct and he's not so in his stack, one of you has a blind spot. And if you can talk about your blind spot, you'll start to develop more compassion for each other, because blind spots are just that. We just don't see what's in front of us. I can walk into a room. Well, my wife likes to walk into the house, and she'll walk in and she'll go, "Oh my God, the house is trashed." I go, "Well, can you point me out? I'm not quite getting the trash thing. What do you notice? You know?" So it's like she'll just see a little clutter in a corner, and it's like the house is trash. So it's just a difference in perception, and so I have compassion for her, of course. Um, so well-groomed yards, nirvana for the self-pres. What else am I going to say? Great kitchens, we've talked about that. And think a lot about food. Most self-pres that I've been around, like, have this thing of, okay, lunch is coming. I wonder what we'll have for lunch. Oh, supper's coming. And my wife will say to me, "What would you like to have for supper?" And I'll say, "I have no idea. I will probably know 10 minutes before supper, and then we can work with it." Said, "Oh no, I like to be organized. Let's get this stuff ready ahead of time." So it's just a different style. So I think a lot about food, ways to prepare it, fix it, making sure they have all the stuff, which is, again, it's a style, it's an orientation. And then the other thing that's often big for self-pres dominant in this area is they like to have comfort foods. If you're going to have a comfortable house, you might as well have food that makes you feel comfortable. So whenever, Don Risa would do a workshop at the barn, we'd have big bowls of chocolate all over the place, or other kinds of sweet treats. So it's certainly not good for the sugar addicts, and he himself would say that he struggled with weight. But there's something around. I want to make sure I have something to give you that makes you feel pleasured and comforted. And when other self-pres, just make sure there's a great bowl of fruit available, apples, oranges, and that has a beautiful feel to it. Like, oh, we're at home here. Look at this beautiful bowl of fruit. That's all self-pres. And then what else do we have? This is one that's kind of fun, which is, I've noticed with self-pres dominant, when they would come to workshops, they would be the ones that would have all their food resources in the front row next to their chair, along with a blanket and a pillow to sit on so they were comfortable, right? We're going to make sure that my comfort is taken care of. I've got cream I need for my skin, my pencils, paper, etc. I got all my supplies, and I'm probably have my favorite stuffed doll because I want to bring that along with me. It always makes me feel good. But it's just again, a style of, I take my home with me. I create a home wherever I go, so another type 4, we were at a place called the Mercy Center in Burlingame. We were doing a part 1. We were talking about the instincts, and she's a type 4. And we talked about how they bring their home with them. And they said, "Come and see my room." And these rooms in Mercy House, Mercy Center in Burlingame, were really the most scorched earth bedroom you could ever have. There was, like, a small mattress, there was a little sink, there was hardly any room to walk back and forth, and there was just this really sparse closet. So we walk into her room, and oh my God, she had wall-to-wall beautiful carpentry, tapestries hanging from the walls. She had a flowing water pond right next to her bed. She had these scarves decorated across the room. I'm going, this is definitely type 4 self-pres. I would never even think of it. So there's a way that it shows up in their journey. So they create nests on the road. And again, they're very attentive to whether there's, whenever we do workshops, the self-pres are always the first ones to say, where are the bathrooms? When are the breaks? I like, I'm a person who likes to have predictable breaks, so try not to go over time. Is there food to eat? Is there a place, someplace we can get food? So again, it's that preparation for my comfort that's big for them. So backup supplies, we talked about that, environmental comfort. So the other thing I just say has to do with creating order and stability in the home through regular food times. Like, so in my sister's house, she's a self-pres type 2. She, they eat supper every day at the same time, 6 o'clock, and lunch is at noon. Now, in our family, I don't think we've ever had one scheduled meal like that in the 25 years we've been together, due to my great influence. Donna would do it if she had more support. But, and the same thing comes with the holidays. It's like there's rituals that I get used to, and whether I appreciate Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter, there's a way I like to create consistent seasonal awareness of both inner and outer events. And so rituals, and oftentimes self-pres, are really good at creating exercise rituals, food rituals, work rituals. It's just how they're wired. So, some questions. Do you create a home that has an ambiance that's soothing to you? What is its climate and atmosphere? Do you care about clutter or cleanliness? Do you attend to having comfortable chairs for self and others? Do you create appealing meals that have both wonderful taste but are also beautiful? There's a way. This is like Martha Stewart and how she prepares, food. Do you create a beautiful lawn and outdoor ambiance? Do you plan your meals mindfully? So again, just sort of fundamental questions. And you don't have to answer yes to all of them to be strong in this. You may notice, well, yeah, 4 out of 5, I do that. So what's your relationship with zone 3? Do you overdo it, overemphasize its importance, or underdo it, or avoid or feel it's unimportant? I just don't notice it. So that's the shadow part for me. I do eat every day, but it's at a different time every day. So it's rather spontaneous, but that's what the sexual dominant does. So let's see what kind of questions we have.
So, Michael, I'm going to ask just a question. So the domesticity thing, I'm very strong in. Like in a hotel room, I make it home, and I traveled for a living, and I would just make it home. Even at home, everything comfortable. I like to cook. I mean, all the things you said, I answered yes to every one of those. But the taking care of well-being and the other part, the finance stuff, like that stuff, not at all. So so if you're like 1 or 2 or 3, right? So can you talk about that now that you've covered all 3 of those? Can you talk a little bit about what if you're strong in one but weak in the others? Because I think that I'm always between, I say, am I sexual, self-pres, and everybody notices I change that depending upon what I learned that day. So if you can answer that, that would be great. And then Michelle will come to you.
Yeah, so the one way of thinking of it is that often the blind spot instinct has 2 zones that aren't strong, but one that is. So in my case, I've got zone 1 really strong, 2 and 3 are average or less than average. But I have one of the zones that's strong. Doesn't make me a self-pres. It just means that I'm awake in that area of the self-pres. And if I wanted to make a project for myself, I would really come up with some tasks that looked at zone 2 and zone 3, just to torture myself, and maybe to grow also. But that's one way of working with it. Now, some people don't necessarily agree with that. They have one zone that's so dominant it just overtakes everything. So that's another way of looking at it, another way of its expression. And again, there's no final facts on this. It's a work in progress.
Okay, and I think what's interesting is as I learn and grow and all of that, I used to have like 16 sets of dishes because every holiday had to have a set of dishes, blah, blah, blah. And I don't do that anymore. I gave away most of my dishes. I do have for a couple seasons, but that's it. So I feel like I'm recovering from the need to be Martha Stewart or something, and it feels very relaxed because I'm not willing to give the energy that I used to give to it. So anyway, thank you for talking about that. All right, so let's move on. Michelle, do you have a question or comment?
Oops, I pressed the button. I somehow put her in the waiting room.
Can somebody bring her back from the waiting room?
That was Okay. I turn on my camera and got crazy on this side. My question was similar to what Cher said in that I really identified with parts of this. And the other parts, I was like, no way. So for like the first two parts, I was like, I'm definitely not this. And I could name all the people that I know that are this. And then I was listening to the third one, and I feel like I have a lot of those, but then um, I just can't get my shit together half the time to do them. So it's more like I want those things and I drive toward those things, but they so don't come naturally and they're so frustrating. And I end up shaming myself for not being those things. So I'm a mess these days, and I think I'm the third variant. I think I'm the sexual one, and I think Cher might have even saw that in me. But anyway,
Well, so
no,
just that if you can help it and not beat yourself up and shame yourself for those challenges in the self-pres, it will actually make it easier to get to them. And usually the weak zones in the self-pres and then the other instincts too, we often have a lot of shame around not being able to do them and can be embarrassed about them. And so, when you start working on them or seeing them and seeing that you fail, I mean, if you want to develop some humility, start working on, the blind spot of the three instincts, because you will fail a lot in the beginning. And if you can be comfortable with that, then you'll get through it. But try not to shame yourself if you can.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Michael. Francine, to you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Michael.
Morning.
I feel like I have maybe I'm just in between. I'm not too much, and I'm not, totally not doing those things. I have a schedule to eat every day. I don't like clutter, so all my friends know, don't let Francine around your stuff because she'll throw it away. They're scared for me they don't want me. They fear me coming over and helping them to organize. So I like things to be organized. Even at work, my desk is clear. Everyone will come into my office and they're like, where's your stuff? Are you working? But I keep my desk clear. I just don't like clutter. But then there's time when things does get cluttered in my life. But I have a question. Since I've been more present with myself, I'm a 9, and since I've been more present, I woke up one morning, and when I wake up in the morning, I stay quiet, but I'm finding things are coming to me. So I woke up more one morning this week, and last week, I believe, and I had this lavender color that I wanted to bring into my apartment to start decorating. And it was like, where is this coming from? But it made me feel so comfortable, and it made me feel good. And I started to imagine, oh, I can have the curtains, I can buy a new rug with this color. And the color it just soothes me. It just makes me feel so good. So I found that to be interesting. That happened just recently last week.
Sounds very self-presish to me. Yeah. So just another thought is, so in the three zones, maybe there's one zone that's repressed or blind. Then the other two might just sort of be average. Like I enter those zones, but they're not like put. I don't light up when I do them. They're not my first choice, but I can do them and take care of them. It's not a big deal, as opposed to I have an aversion, to zone 1 and 2, and just keep them away from me. That's a different relationship. So, in terms of finding the middle instinct, there's usually one one zone that's strong and the other two are just kind of average, just hanging out and not a big deal, doesn't cause a lot of problems. I can do them, but I'm not a pro at them because it's not my dominant instinct. So just another way of sorting it out.
Thank you.
Mhm. So who is next?
Sorry, I was muted. So thank you, Francine. Thank you, Michael. Cheryl from West New York, you're next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl. I'm type 4. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. So the zone 3, home, domesticality, the home comfort zones, organization, anxious when things are disordered. Those sound like good qualities to me. And actually, that's where I believe I fall in. My question is that I was told that's considered being a perfectionist when things are disordered. And the perfectionist thing doesn't sound like a good quality. All the other things that you talked about in zone 3 sound like great qualities to me. So wondering what your feedback is on that.
That word perfectionism can be very misused. And there's a place for perfectionism. It's whether and then so it's in degrees. You might, really keep your house ordered and clean and non-chaotic. And the question is, can you do it without feeling a lot of anxiety or feeling a pressure to sort of get everybody else to do it? And so how much does it occupy your psyche and cause you what I might call unnecessary suffering? But my wife is a perfectionist around when she cleans the house, it is spotless. It's like, oh my God, thank God you know how to clean, because we'd be in terrible trouble if we let Michael do it. And then she lets it go and she's off and she's doing this and that, but she doesn't obsess over it. So again, there's degrees of perfectionism. I mean, if you're doing any kind of creative art or creative project, you're shooting for as perfect as you can make it. That doesn't make you a neurotic person. Yeah, it's just whether it haunts you all the time and you can't, takes you away from connecting with people or being at ease in your own skin. And then it's just a matter of degrees. So I wouldn't worry so much about that label if I was you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Cheryl. Jasmine, to you.
Thank you, Michael, for this presentation. I was just wondering, I have a lot of trauma in this whole realm of zone because growing up in a dysfunctional family, it was weaponized, like being one way or the other. And I find myself being like a perpetrator in that way in my home because I have the trauma coming up for me, either being criticized for not being a good enough housekeeper or being in squalor. Like it's been extremes and a lot of trauma around this stuff. So what I'm saying is, I heard you say it's about having compassion for these qualities and traits in one another and not taking it personally. This is where I struggle because I take it personally. Sometimes like you were talking about, like the jacket being on the floor. I don't know if it could be forgiven. And then sometimes I can be really, really harsh. What do you suggest? I know I need to heal. I know I need to heal and I'm working on it so hard. But yeah.
Well, I don't have an easy answer. And I would just say that it's a work in progress. And, noticing when you feel like you're overdoing it and learning to resist that a little bit. Because, if someone came into my house and really just messed it up, I would be angry. I'd say, clean this thing up or death awaits you. It's there's certain areas where it's really correct. If my kids come in and like my son used to cook and then leave all the pots all over, and I would get furious with them. I said, this is not okay. And it wasn't because I was a perfectionist. I mean, I'm far from that when it comes to cleaning. But so again, it's situational. And you know, so I think we need to have a longer conversation about it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jasmine, for that question. Vera, to you.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Michael. This has been very enlightening. I'm definitely not in the 1 and 2 zones, but the 3, yes. And I think that in my case, it's not so much about perfectionism, but it's like I have to watch out that I don't then start hiding in this perfectly organized home.
How would you do that? That sounds interesting. You get organized and you like become one of the couches.
No, I mean it's just a perfect environment, and it's and I think that before I got into recovery, it wasn't, but I suffered a lot from when I saw chaos. I don't like chaos because not just because it's chaos, but because it's ugly.
Yeah, well,
And I'm a 4, and I'm a sexual 4, and I think that beauty and and harmony are really, really important for my peace of mind.
absolutely, absolutely. So there's no right or wrong about it. And you know, chaos, a pile of clothes on the floor can look pretty ugly. I mean, it's not necessarily
Yeah.
a pretty sight, right? You got socks
That's it.
wear and pants and you know, wet towels, whatever. So,
Yeah.
you know, and if it sounds like that's a zone that you're sensitive to, that you
I am very, but I've got 4 teenagers at home, so
oh my God.
I became a lot less perfectionistic. So, but it's fine, it's fine. But my question was much more to do with zones 1 and 2. I've been in DA, UA, and other fellowships that, about regarding money. I understand that I'm not practical at all most of the time. I'm becoming more practical, actually.
Hmm.
And I think this is recovery. But I was wondering, and you were talking about this being defense patterns when they're just like blind spots, right? And this used to be the case very much with money, and not so much now. But I was wondering if you think that step 6 and 7 actually work to release these patterns, or how would you cross that with the steps?
Well,
Useful.
the way I would cross it with the steps is just that the more I can notice and have compassion for my activity in that zone and not beat myself up, that the more I'm able to bring compassion, the more it often wakes up a will to do something about it. But it doesn't come from me making myself or trying to will myself. And again, it's a strategy. If you find another way to get to those tasks, that's great. But I think in my situation, so I grew up in a family where my mother and my father and my brother and my sister were all self-pres. So I didn't inherit any self-pres. I witnessed it. I saw people doing it, but I was never drawn to some of the core things except for maybe the zone 1. But also, what was interesting for me is I noticed that when it came to practicality, I had almost like a rebellion against being practical. And so, like, what is that about? Well, I don't really know completely, but my mom and my dad were very strong around making money and having, you know, things look a certain way and how we looked in the neighborhood. And for some reason, I developed an aversion and a rebellion around that also, you know, affected my ability to get to becoming practical and get to being more home aware. So we all have different things that sort of create a dissonance. I think that I was hardwired to not notice practical things. I've just never been drawn to it. You know, all my guy friends are fixing their cars and building this and that, and I'm just playing sports. You know, I'm a sexual type, and like, let's go compete. I don't know why you guys do this, but I just give me a baseball and a mitt, and I'll be happy. So, so there's little things that affect our relationship with those zones.
All right. Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Michael. Carmen, to you.
Thank you for talking about this. As a 9,
I often wonder whether my perfectionism also is a way to procrastinate, being a delayer, not wanting to do things. So if I can work really hard on something and make it perfect, then well, I don't have to do those other things that maybe even are sometimes a little difficult for me. Would like your comment on that. Thank you.
So say a little bit more about that,
Oh.
how that works.
An example. I've been building this sailboat for 12 years. I recently went to a workshop where I worked on it very, very hard. And I was working on the bottom of the boat. And I asked one of the guys how I could make something better on it. And he looked at me and he said, well, Carmen, you could either make the bottom of the boat that nobody will ever see really perfect, or you could get out sailing. And I now carry that with me. But part of it too is that boat was a challenge for me. And often tasks are, oh God, I'd rather just make this paint spotless rather than moving on to this other task that I don't know if I can, I don't know if I have the wherewithal or the skills to work on it.
Well, I'd encourage you not to overthink it, because it would be easy to do. Some people are wired towards sort of finishing and getting the last thing done before they move on to the next. And that's just how their hard wiring is. It's not a flaw. I guess what you're challenged to do is notice, what is it I have an aversion to? Is it, aside from I'm working on this boat, I love this boat, but even if the boat wasn't there, what do I have aversion to certain things? And do they fall into any of the zones, in that first instinct?
Okay, yeah. So your question about do they fall into the different zones? I haven't thought about that before. Thank you.
Awesome. Great.
So I have another question. So the end question is going to be the zone, basically these three zones, or even the instincts and aging. But I'm going to tell the story first. Okay. So during the disco era, which most of you were not even alive during the disco era, but I was a young woman, and so I go to the disco, come home, and somebody had broken into my car. So I called the cops, and the cops said, well, we better check your apartment because it has an address on the registration. So we walk into the apartment. He says, oh my God, it's been ransacked. And it wasn't. That's the way I lived, right? Well, I do not live like that at all now, right? At all. I was like, no, this is the way I live. Right? Anyway, but my house is always organized, and always now. And it delights me that it is. That didn't not delight me back then. It ashamed me, I guess, a little bit, but I wouldn't put the energy in it. And now it just delights me. So you know what I mean? So talk to me about like aging and instincts, I guess, is the question I have.
Well, it sounds like a maturation process, with some kind of eye on, at some point, if my house is a mess, it's not going to work well with my social connection. So, if somebody has a strong social instinct and their weakness is self-pres, then they may work on that self-pres zone just to make sure that when friends come over, everybody's comfortable, or I have something that's presentable, which is one of the strategies I use. But it's sometimes going to be hard to just pinpoint one particular feature like that and then try to lump it to the whole instinct. And also, I think we mature, and sometimes we don't. Just depends on.
Well, I thank God I did. So.
God for my wife. That's all I can say. It sounds like you have grown to appreciate an organized house and a clean house, and
for sure.
So I think that's part of a healthy.
Well, and it's funny too, because you talk about like my pantry. Not only is everything, I know where everything in my kitchen, in my house, I know where everything is, but also all the cans are lined up so that the labels are toward the front. I mean, that's a deal with me, I guess, but I don't. But the money and the health stuff, fuck that. I don't care about any of that. So yeah. Anyway,
the third zone sounds like the third zone is
third zone's very strong. The other two, yeah. All right. So any other questions, anything else or anything? Go ahead, Michael. Anything else that you want to cover or talk about on these zones?
No, I don't. I look forward to starting in on the social instinct, and I'm going to do that whole social instinct next time we meet in like 4 weeks, something like that. So there's that. And then if you haven't, you could go to the Enneagram Institute and take their instinctual variance test to see how it scores for you. And then also I mentioned the article that I've written that kind of explores the zones, and that's something that people can read just to start looking at it. But yeah, this has been great.
Yeah, so I want to talk for a second. So EnneagramMaine.com is Michael's. That's his website.
Yeah.
And there is an article out there on the instincts that goes, and it explains quite a bit. So you'll want to go there. And
Yeah.
so one of the reasons I talked about the aging part, I guess, is because years ago when I took the Enneagram, the instincts test on Enneagram Institute, I was like really high on one, like everything was spread way out, right? And then I took it here recently and it's kind of evened out. It's like 53, 52, 49, something. So that's kind of evened out, which is a maturation process, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
Okay.
balance it, definitely. Definitely. Then see, what was I going to say? Just so the balancing out doesn't mean my dominant goes away, but that I use it in a way that's really healthy and I don't get taken by it. And then I can access my shadow point. So it sounds like, that third zone in self-pres has matured and gotten more conscious. And the other two are just waiting for the next lifetime.
Yeah, I think so. I have a cardiologist appointment on Monday where hopefully he clears me for exercise. So I'm moving in that direction, which is good. So, so can you take a little bit of time to tell us about your like your counseling sessions or that kind of stuff? Because I'm seeing a lot of interest in that kind of thing that you do. And if you could share that with us, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So the coaching counseling I do, I utilize both the Enneagram and also my experience in all the growth processes I've gone through in my life, including addiction and recovery and all of that, whether it's codependence, whether it's, active addiction. But anyway, what happens is people usually come with a particular challenge that they keep bumping up against that is often very much related to some aspect of their Enneagram type. And so we begin working with some practices for how to, at least observe the pattern, not beat myself up for it, develop more compassion and patience with witnessing and noticing that as I get more conscious of the pattern, it starts to disappear. That may be one thing, but then there's other little practices you can do to kind of, keep yourself present. Presence practices, anything that on a daily basis you do that brings you into a state of connection with your body, heart, and head is a presence practice. So, we do a lot of conversations about how to develop those so that you have eyes to see what you're looking for, which is yourself, and how your voice comes across, how your body posture comes across, how how your tone of voice affects things, all of that. So ultimately what happens is usually people have two or three primary things, and it's often, let's just say a type 2 will come to me, knows the type 2, and this is not uncommon, says, I know the type 2, but I can't stop giving too much. How can I start working on that? And so then we'll go through a whole process of looking at possibilities, practices they can use for navigating that, developing compassion around it. And so, that's sort of what the focus is a spiritual focus. It's not about going back into transforming childhood patterns, which would be therapy, but it is around transforming something right now in the moment that I keep stepping on or stepping over. And for many people, the first challenge is just noticing the pattern and then not beating themselves up over it. Because, the instinct that most of us got was if I beat the crap out of myself, I'll kill the bad pattern. But little did I know that I just put 400 pounds in its muscles to come back and whop me again. So as easy as it sounds to just stop doing that, it can take some conversations and moments of just reflection that begin to soften that. So
thank you. Now you are also a therapist. So if you notice that somebody needs or might want therapy, do you also do that?
Well, I don't, if someone has a recurring emotional pattern that needs therapy, I recommend them to somebody. Okay. But I have certainly, as a Enneagram teacher and coach and professional coach, have capacity to help them start to rest with that pattern and see it so it's less unconscious and taking them in. But it's not about, I'm not trying to get rid of the pattern or even do a deep dive. So that's where I think therapy and coaching is different.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And if you have those patterns, they're often manifesting in something right here, right now. So ultimately, my work is to help you really get right here, right now, and have eyes to see what's going on. So if you work on those therapy issues, you'll also have a better perception of how to enter them and talk about them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So one of the things that we're doing, so this is the beginning of the first Fridays. So just so that you put it on your calendar, first Fridays of each month is when we're doing this. So next week, you'll do sexual next?
What am I doing next week?
No, next month I meant.
Oh.
So the first next, what am I doing next week? I don't know. I'm not your social secretary. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, so next month, I'm sorry. So next month we'll do sexual and then
The exciting
social.
sexual instinct. That's
Okay. And he'll cover all three zones. The month after that, then it'll be the social instinct, all three zones. And then after that is the practices that you can take for each of those to strengthen any of the areas that you're not strong in. All right. So Carmen, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Quick question. Could you direct us to a resource to read more about the instincts? I even think I saw something that you had written somewhere, but
yes, there's the article I've written, which uses this approach, which is the approach Riso Hudson, Don Riso, Russ Hudson, and what I work with. That is, I think, will help you understand what we're talking about. So if you went on my website and you scrolled across the top and then drop down, you'd see the article on the instincts. There are a couple other authors. There's 3 other books out there. One is by B. Chestnut, one is by Mario Sikora, and one is by John Lukovich. And they all have a slightly different take. So it's good to, play the field and see what's there. I always say, take what you need and leave the rest. I don't think anybody has, in my experience, the last word. It's not a perfected art. And with all of us, if we get 85% correct in our understanding, that's pretty darn good, considering we haven't been studying it really that long. So, but anyway.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Michael. And Divya, to you.
Thank you. My question is more for Surrender School organizers. How soon will the recording be posted on YouTube? I've missed the first part of this session. It's 4 a.m. for me in Australia. And I thought it started at 4, but apparently it started at 3. So yeah, just curious when it'll be posted. Thank you.
Most of our recordings we say will be posted within a week. I realize there's one out there that needs to be put up that just didn't get put up, and I apologize for that.
So the first one is out there. I don't know, Divya, if you've seen that. So if you go under everything we offer, you'll see Enneagram Instincts. So the first session is out there, and this session will be out in about a week. Thank you.
Great. No, I was live for the first. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Divya. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, yeah, what I do is I will go into the top bar and type in Surrender School YouTube, and then all the YouTube plays that you guys have done come up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
I think we're good. Everybody good?
Take
all right.
Leave the rest.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for recovering with us.